The business-class cabin hummed with privilege. Amanda Cole, blonde hair gleaming, red designer dress perfect, laughed into her phone. When the black man approached her row, she didn't look up. "Excuse me, that's my seat," he said quietly. Amanda's eyes swept over his cheap clothes. She burst out laughing. "Security. There's someone from economy lost up here." She turned to passengers. "Can you believe this? They'll let anyone wander in now. Sir, economy is in the back. Way back. Where you belong." The cabin stared. The man sat down anyway. Nobody knew Amanda Cole had been raised to believe the world belonged to people like her. 28 years of private schools, gated communities, and careful insulation from anyone who didn't look, speak, or spend like her. Beverly Hills wasn't just her hometown. It was her entire universe, a bubble so complete she couldn't see its edges. Her father, Richard Cole, managed a hedge fund worth $12 billion. Her mother, Catherine, organized charity galas, where wealthy white women wrote checks to help communities they'd never actually visit. The Cole family believed in giving back, as long as back stayed at a safe distance. At Exeter, Amanda had been everything that mattered in that world. Student council, president, field hockey captain, head of the social committee that decided who belonged and who didn't. The few black students were either sports recruits or the children of entertainers, exceptions that proved the rule she'd never questioned. At Yale, she'd majored in marketing with a minor in maintaining the status quo. Her senior thesis on luxury brand positioning in emerging markets had won awards, though she'd never actually visited any emerging market. Why would she? They could come to her, properly packaged and sanitized in PowerPoint presentations. Her career at Lux Media had been inevitable rather than earned. The boutique marketing firm handled Cartier, Hermès, Bentley, brands that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Amanda had become creative director at 26, the youngest in the company's history, though everyone knew Daddy's connections had opened that door. She'd been good at her job, understanding instinctively how to sell exclusivity to people desperate to exclude others. Her campaigns had won awards: Inherited Excellence for Patek Philippe, Born to Distinction for Rolls-Royce. She never noticed the pattern, until last week. The Cartier campaign, featuring all-white models in an urban setting, wearing diamonds while standing in front of graffiti, had exploded on social media. Tone deaf, the kind critics called it. Casually racist, said the honest ones. A stunning display of privilege, wrote the viral think pieces. The client had pulled out within 48 hours. Amanda had been laterally moved to senior strategist, a title that meant nothing, and everyone knew it. Her office had been relocated from the corner suite to an interior room that used to be storage. This flight to New York was supposed to be her comeback. The luxury brand summit would put her back in the room with people who mattered, people who understood that excellence had a look, a sound, a zip code. She'd worn her red Carolina Herrera dress, the one that cost $3,000 and photographed perfectly for Instagram. Her Louboutin heels, changed out once seated, cost another $2,000. The Birkin bag, a 21st birthday gift from Daddy, was worth more than most people's annual salaries. First class had been sold out, but business class on Aerolux was supposedly excellent. She'd never flown the airline before. It was new, only 7 years old, but had won awards. Still, looking at her seatmate, she wondered if standards were slipping everywhere. The man beside her had ordered water. Just water. No champagne. No wine consultation. No menu perusal. His clothes were tragic. Dark jeans that looked like Walmart. A white shirt that screamed Target clearance rack. He was reading some old book with yellowed pages, probably picked up from a yard sale. Everything about him screamed, upgraded with miles or company discount. Amanda had seen his type before. Middle management, probably in tech support or accounting. Trying to feel important by flying business class once a year. The way he sat so still, so careful not to take up space, confirmed it. He knew he didn't belong here. She would make sure everyone else knew it too. She made sure he knew it too. When he'd reached for his water, she dramatically pulled her bag closer, as if he might contaminate it with his poverty. When he'd adjusted his seat, she'd sighed loudly and called the flight attendant to complain about the comfort level. She'd taken 3 phone calls, each louder than the last, discussing million-dollar campaigns and private jets, making sure everyone knew she belonged here and he didn't. The other passengers had noticed. She'd seen them looking, some uncomfortable, others approving. The natural order was being maintained, and she was its guardian. Elijah Brooks had learned to be invisible long before he'd learned to be powerful. 36 years of practice, started in Chicago's South Side, refined at MIT, perfected in corporate America before he'd burned it all down to build something better. Now, sitting in business class of his own airline, wearing clothes that cost less than Amanda's shoes, he remembered why he still did this monthly ritual. Comfort was dangerous. Comfort made you forget where you came from. Comfort made you soft, and soft was something he could never afford to be. Not even with $3.7 billion in the bank. The book in his hands was his mother's copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Pages yellowed with age and use. She'd found it in a box of items left behind by an evicted tenant in one of the offices she cleaned. The margins were filled with her notes, written in pencil during breaks between mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Power is not what you have, but what you do with it. She'd written next to a passage about authority. Remember this, baby, she'd told him. The powerful only stay powerful by making others feel powerless. Don't let them. He'd been 12 when she'd said that, already aware that the world saw him as less than, already fighting to prove otherwise. Dolores Brooks had worked 3 jobs to keep her 4 children fed, clothed, and in school. Night shifts cleaning offices downtown, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Morning shifts at a grocery store, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Afternoons caring for Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who paid cash and asked no questions about documentation. She'd come home exhausted, feet swollen, hands cracked from cleaning chemicals, but she'd still help Elijah with his homework. Education is the one thing they can't take from you, she'd say, checking his math even though she'd never finished high school. Learn everything, then learn more, then learn what they don't want to teach you. The South Side apartment had been directly under O'Hare's flight path. Every 30 seconds, another plane would roar overhead, shaking the walls, rattling the windows, making conversation impossible. His siblings hated it, covered their ears, complained constantly. Elijah loved it. He'd lie awake naming the aircraft types by their engine sounds. Boeing 737, a whistle in the turbines. Airbus A320, slightly quieter, more refined. McDonnell Douglas MD-80, loud and angry, like it was fighting the air. By age 10, he could identify them blind. By 15, he knew their fuel capacities, ranges, and operational costs. By 17, he was working at O'Hare, loading the same planes he'd spent his childhood watching. The work was brutal. Chicago winters meant fingers that went numb despite doubled gloves, meant slipping on icy tarmacs, meant loading hundreds of bags while snow cut your face like glass. Summers meant being drenched in sweat before sunrise, meant heat shimmer from the concrete that made you dizzy, meant drinking water by the gallon and still feeling dehydrated. But Elijah studied everything. How planes were loaded for weight distribution, how fuel costs affected route decisions, how airlines made money on some routes while losing on others, how certain passengers got treated like royalty, while others got treated like cargo. An old mechanic named Duke became his mentor. Duke had fled Vietnam in '75, arrived with nothing, built himself into O'Hare's best mechanic through skill and determination. "You have the sickness," Duke told him one day, watching Elijah sketch flight patterns during his lunch break. "Aviation sickness. It will eat you alive or give you wings. No middle ground." Duke taught him about more than engines and hydraulics. He taught him about systems. "This industry," Duke said, "is like the Mekong Delta. Looks calm on top, but underneath, everything's connected. You disturb one part, everything shifts. You want to change aviation? Don't attack it, understand it, then rebuild it from inside." MIT had nearly broken him. Not academically. He'd graduated summa cum laude in aerospace engineering. But culturally, socially, he'd been an alien species. His classmates complained about spring break being only 2 weeks in Europe. He worked 60 hours a week between classes to pay for food and books. They joined eating clubs where dinner cost more than his monthly food budget. He ate 1 meal a day to save money, lost 30 pounds freshman year. Told his mother it was from all the walking. They networked with professors over cocktails. He cleaned those professors' offices at night, careful they never saw him, preserving the illusion that he belonged in their classrooms. When his mother had a stroke sophomore year, massive, devastating, leaving her partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly, he'd packed to drop out. The medical bills were insurmountable. His siblings needed him. But Professor Chen had shown up at his dorm room. Elizabeth Chen, first woman to get tenure in MIT's aerospace department, daughter of immigrants, fighter of battles. Elijah was just beginning to understand. "You're not quitting," she'd said simply. "Your tuition is covered for the rest of your time here." "I can't accept charity," he'd said. "It's not charity. It's investment. You'll pay it forward someday. That's the deal. Take it, or break your mother's heart." By quitting, he'd taken it, and he had paid it forward 1,000 times over. United Airlines had promised him the world. 5 years later, he understood the promise had been a lie wrapped in corporate speak. His ideas were brilliant. Everyone agreed on that. His fuel efficiency protocols could save 40 million annually. His route optimization algorithm was revolutionary. But somehow, his presentations were always given by Brad from Princeton, or Connor from Harvard, or, worst of all, Chad from Yale. His innovations appeared in reports with their names attached. When he complained, he was told to be patient and appreciate the exposure. When his proposal for a luxury budget airline, premium service at economy prices on underserved routes, was rejected then stolen by the CEO's son-in-law 6 months later, he'd quit that day, drove straight to his mother's nursing home, sat beside her bed, and told her he was starting his own airline. She'd smiled through the paralysis, struggled to speak, managed 2 words. About time. The jet bridge at Gate 23 was packed with deplaning passengers pushing toward baggage claim. Amanda shoved through them like they were furniture, texting furiously about her car service, already forgetting the plane and everyone on it. She'd gotten what she needed from the flight. A story about how standards were slipping everywhere, content for her group chat, validation that she still belonged in rarefied air, even if her job title suggested otherwise. That's why she didn't notice the reception committee at first. 6 executives in navy blue Aerolux uniforms stood in perfect formation just outside the gate area. Patricia Nguyen, Chief Operations Officer, held an iPad displaying real-time flight statistics and stock prices. James Thompson, CFO, carried quarterly reports bound in leather. The others, heads of marketing, safety, customer experience, and labor relations, all waited at attention like a military honor guard. "Mr. Brooks," Patricia called out as Elijah emerged from the jet bridge. "Welcome back, sir. The board meeting has been moved to 4 as requested. The Times interview is confirmed for 9 tomorrow morning. The Journal wants to know if you'll comment on the Delta acquisition rumors." The entire gate area froze. Phones appeared. Recording started. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. Amanda turned around slowly, her Louboutins clicking against the floor, her face draining of color like someone had opened a vein. Patricia continued, unaware of the unfolding drama. "Also, sir, the mayor wants to discuss the Aviation Academy expansion. 3 more cities are interested: Detroit, Baltimore, and Newark." And Forbes called about the cover story, from baggage handler to billionaire. "They want to know if you'll pose with one of the old bags you used to load." I told them that was reductive and insulting, but they insisted I ask. James, young and eager, stepped forward with a garment bag. "Your suit for the board meeting, Mr. Brooks. I know you prefer flying incognito, but the Goldman representatives expect—" "Thank you, James." Elijah's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "The car? Waiting, sir. The Bentley? Or the Tesla? The subway?" "I'll take the subway." His team exchanged glances but didn't question it. This was Elijah Brooks. He did things his way. Elijah looked directly at Amanda. She stood frozen, mouth open, phone hanging limply at her side, her entire worldview collapsing in real time. Their eyes met, his calm and knowing, hers wide with horror. He didn't smile, didn't frown. His expression held something worse than anger, profound disappointment mixed with exhausted familiarity. The look you give when someone proves they're exactly who you expected them to be. "Miss Cole," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the space between them. "I hope you enjoy the summit. I hear they're discussing inclusive luxury this year. You might find it educational." Then he walked past her, his team falling into formation behind him. The last thing Amanda heard was Patricia asking about the incident in business class and whether they should file a complaint with the FAA about discriminatory behavior. No. Elijah's voice carried back. "Sometimes people need to live with their choices. It's the only way they learn." Jessica, the flight attendant, wheeled her bag past Amanda, stopped, leaned in close enough that Amanda could smell her perfume. Something understated, professional. "That man you just humiliated? He owns this airline. Built it from nothing. Started loading bags at O'Hare when he was 17. Now he's worth $3.7 billion. He flies commercial once a month to remember where he came from, to stay connected to real passengers. But you wouldn't understand that kind of humility, would you?" She walked away, leaving Amanda alone as whispers erupted around her. "Did you see how she treated him? The actual CEO of the airline. I got it all on video. $3.7 billion. She called him, 'You people.' This is going viral. Wait until Black Twitter sees this." Amanda ran to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, fell to her knees, and vomited champagne and privilege in equal measure. Her phone buzzed incessantly. The video was already uploading to social media. Her life, as she knew it, was over. And she didn't even know it yet. Elijah Brooks had been 7 years old when he'd decided to own an airplane. Not fly one, own one. The distinction mattered in ways his 7-year-old mind couldn't fully articulate but somehow understood. Pilots were employees. Owners were emperors of the sky. The decision had come at 3 in the morning, standing at the window of their 2-bedroom apartment, watching a red-eye flight pass overhead, its lights blinking like stars he could almost touch. His mother had found him there, as she always did, returning from her night shift, her shoes in her hand because her feet hurt too much to wear them. "Can't sleep, baby?" she'd asked, putting her hand on his small shoulder. "Mama," he'd said, pointing at the plane disappearing into the darkness. "I'm gonna own one of those planes." She hadn't laughed, hadn't said it was impossible, hadn't told him to be realistic. Dolores Brooks had looked at her son, saw something in his eyes that she recognized. The same determination that had gotten her out of rural Alabama, the same refusal to accept limitations that had kept her going through 3 jobs and 4 children and an absent father, and a world that told her she was nothing. "Then you better start learning how they work," she'd said simply. "And, baby, when you own that plane, you remember those of us down here on the ground." School had been Elijah's sanctuary and battleground simultaneously. Sanctuary, because his mind could soar beyond the gunshots and sirens of his neighborhood, beyond the dealers on the corner and the police who treated everyone like criminals, beyond the limitations that zip code tried to impose. Battleground, because being smart and black meant fighting 2 wars at once. The war against low expectations from white teachers who were surprised when he excelled, who asked if someone had helped him with his homework, who suggested he consider more realistic career goals. The war against high expectations from his community, who needed him to succeed for all of them, who saw in him the possibility they'd been denied, who couldn't afford for him to fail. When he'd won the state mathematics championship, the local news had run a story. "Against all odds, inner-city student triumphs." He'd hated that headline. His triumph wasn't against odds. It was against systems designed to create those odds. It was against people who profited from those odds. It was against a world that needed those odds to exist to justify its own inequality. But he'd smiled for the cameras, shaken hands with the mayor, played the role of the grateful scholarship kid, all while planning his revolution. At 17, he'd shown up at O'Hare every day for 3 weeks until they'd hired him. The hiring manager, exhausted by his persistence, had given him the worst job available: wheelchair assistance, pushing elderly passengers through terminals for tips that rarely came. but Elijah had treated it like graduate school. He listened to their stories of when flying was glamorous, when people dressed up for flights, when dinner was served on real china. He learned about the golden age of aviation and why it had ended. He understood that democratizing flight had meant diminishing its dignity. Then came baggage, throwing hundreds of pounds of other people's lives into cargo holds. His supervisor, a racist drunk named Patterson, had called him boy until Elijah had reported him. Patterson was transferred, not fired. Elijah learned that justice and satisfaction rarely traveled together. But he also learned how planes were loaded, how weight distribution affected fuel consumption, how seemingly small inefficiencies multiplied into massive losses. He started writing ideas in a notebook he kept in his locker, ideas that would later become Aerolux. But Duke, the Vietnamese mechanic, had been his real education. Duke had been in the South Vietnamese Air Force, had escaped Saigon on April 29, 1975, on one of the last helicopters out. He'd arrived in America with nothing, had rebuilt his entire life at 50, had become the best mechanic at O'Hare through skill that transcended language barriers. This industry, Duke had said, teaching Elijah about more than engines, is like the Mekong Delta. Looks calm on top, but underneath, everything's connected. You disturb one part, everything shifts. You want to change aviation? Don't attack it. Understand it. Master it. Then rebuild it from inside. Duke had taught him to read balance sheets like mechanical diagrams, to understand that airlines were not about planes, but about logistics, that success wasn't about having the best equipment, but the best systems, that the majority of airline profits came from a tiny percentage of passengers, and that those passengers, first class, business class, the Amanda Coles of the world, shaped the entire industry's perception of who deserved comfort, who deserved dignity, who deserved to fly. MIT had been 4 years of suffocation punctuated by moments of pure oxygen. The suffocation came from being surrounded by people who'd never questioned their right to be there, who wore their privilege like skin, who couldn't see it because they'd never existed without it. His roommate, Bradley Vanderberg III, had asked on day 1 if Elijah was there on a basketball scholarship. Elijah was 5'10" and had never played organized sports. The assumption wasn't about athletics. It was about what Bradley's world had taught him about how black people entered elite spaces. The oxygen came from learning, from finally having access to the knowledge he'd craved. Aerospace engineering wasn't just about planes. It was about defying gravity, about making the impossible routine, about turning dreams into mathematics and mathematics into reality. He excelled, top of his class, but success at MIT came with a price. 60-hour work weeks on top of full-course loads. 1 meal a day to save money. Clothes from Goodwill while his classmates wore Canada Goose. Watching them complain about spring break being only 2 weeks in Aspen while he worked double shifts at a warehouse. When his mother had the stroke, sophomore year, during finals week. The call coming while he was in the middle of a thermodynamics exam. His world had imploded. The medical bills were astronomical. His siblings needed him. The family was drowning. He'd packed to drop out, had actually filled out the withdrawal forms, when Professor Elizabeth Chen had appeared at his door. She was barely 5 feet tall, but she filled the doorframe with presence. "You're not quitting," she'd said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Your tuition is covered for the rest of your time here. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's investment. I'm buying stock in your future. You'll pay it forward someday. That's the deal. Take it, or break your mother's heart." By quitting, he'd taken it. Years later, he'd endowed a scholarship fund at MIT in Professor Chen's name, worth $50 million. She'd called him crying, said it was too much. He'd said it wasn't enough, could never be enough for someone who'd saved his life. United Airlines had recruited him aggressively. They'd needed diversity for their annual reports, brilliance for their bottom line, someone to point to when accused of discrimination. Elijah had delivered everything they'd wanted, and more. His fuel efficiency protocols had saved them $40 million in the first year alone. His route optimization algorithm had opened 17 new markets. His analysis of customer behavior had revolutionized their pricing strategies. But when promotion time came, Brad Stevens, whose father golfed with the CEO, became vice president of strategic planning. Connor Williams, whose uncle sat on the board, got the European division. Elijah got a raise that didn't match inflation and a pat on the back. "Be patient," they'd said. "Your time will come." His time had come when he'd proposed Aerolux, a luxury budget airline targeting underserved markets. Premium service at economy prices on routes nobody wanted. First-class dignity for working-class people. He'd spent months on the business plan. Had models showing profitability within 3 years. Had identified funding sources. Had even preliminary agreements from airports desperate for service. They'd laughed. Actually laughed in the boardroom. Called it Brooks' folly. Said it was financially impossible and strategically unsound. The CEO had said, condescendingly, "Elijah, you have to understand, certain markets simply can't support premium service." 6 months later, the CEO's son-in-law, Chad Worthington IV, announced an identical concept as his innovation. They gave him $50 million in seed funding and a press release calling him a visionary. That was the day Elijah had understood. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, and he would never fix it from inside. So he decided to build his own system. He'd quit that day, cleaned out his desk, drove straight to his mother's nursing home. She'd been watching Jeopardy, could barely speak through the paralysis, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "I'm starting my own airline," he'd told her. She'd smiled, struggled to form words. Managed 3. About damn time. Amanda sat on the bathroom floor of JFK Airport, her $3,000 dress crumpled against the dirty tile, scrolling through Google results with shaking fingers. Elijah Brooks, Aerolux CEO, returned thousands of hits. Forbes, the billionaire who still flies coach. Wall Street Journal, how Elijah Brooks disrupted aviation while everyone was looking down. Black Enterprise, from O'Hare baggage handler to owning the airport. Time, the most important CEO you've never heard of. Each article included photos of the man she'd just humiliated, shaking hands with presidents, speaking at the UN about economic inequality, standing with his employees, wearing the same simple clothes he'd worn on the plane, the same warm smile, the same quiet dignity she'd tried to strip away. One photo stopped her cold. Elijah loading baggage in the rain, soaked through, helping during the Christmas storm that had made him famous. The caption read, "Brooks personally insured. Every passenger made it home for the holidays." The video was already viral. Racist woman humiliates airline CEO on his own plane. Instant karma. Someone had caught everything. Her "you people" comment. Her call for security. Her strutting exit. The revelation of who he was. Her face at that moment. The moment her world shattered. Was becoming a meme. When you're racist but he owns the plane. Congratulations, you played yourself. This is what privilege looks like. The caucasity of it all. 3 million views in 2 hours. Then 5 million. Then 10. Her phone rang. Her boss. She didn't answer. It rang again. Her father. She couldn't face that either. Her mother. Her best friend. Her ex-boyfriend. Everyone had seen it. She tried to write an apology 17 times. Each attempt felt hollow, performative, like the campaigns she'd created. "I didn't know who you were," which made it worse, not better. "I was having a bad day, irrelevant and insulting." "I'm not racist," the video suggested otherwise. "This isn't who I am." Except it was exactly who she was. Finally, she wrote simply, "Mr. Brooks, I behaved abominably. There is no excuse. I am deeply sorry for my words, my actions, and the beliefs that created them. I am work to do better." She didn't send it. It felt too small for the harm done. Instead, she sat on the bathroom floor and, for the first time in her 28 years, actually looked at herself. Not in a mirror, but truly looked. And what she saw made her sick. She'd been raised in a bubble so complete she hadn't known it existed. Every black person in her life had been in a service role. Cleaners, drivers, security, nannies. The few exceptions, athletes, entertainers, the occasional tech entrepreneur, had been just that. Exceptions that proved the rule. She'd never had a black friend, never had a black teacher, never had a black boss, never had a black equal. Her world had been segregated so thoroughly, so elegantly, that she'd never noticed the charity galas her mother organized for urban youth. She'd never met any of them. The scholarships her father's fund provided to underprivileged minorities. She'd never met those recipients either. Her entire life had been structured to maintain distance while performing proximity. The bathroom door opened. Another woman entered, saw Amanda on the floor, started to ask if she was okay, then recognized her. "Oh my God. You're the woman from the video. The racist plane lady." She pulled out her phone. Amanda didn't move. Let her record. Let everyone see. She deserved this. The woman left, and Amanda heard her outside. "She's in here. The racist plane lady is having a breakdown in the bathroom." Within minutes, security arrived. Not to arrest her. Being racist wasn't illegal, but to escort her out for her own safety. The crowd that had gathered wanted their pound of flesh. They got their pictures as security led her through the terminal. Mascara running, dress wrinkled, the perfect image of privilege in collapse. Her father called again. This time she answered. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard Cole's voice was arctic. "Dad, 40 years building our reputation, and you destroy it in 5 hours. The mayor called me." "The fucking mayor." "Amanda, asked if our family shares your values. The country club is considering revoking our membership. The charity board wants Mom to step down. You've ruined us." She wanted to say they'd ruined themselves long ago, that he'd taught her these values, that he'd built the bubble she'd lived in, that he'd shown her through 1,000 subtle lessons that people like Elijah Brooks didn't belong in their world. But she stayed silent. "Fix this," he said. "I don't care how, but fix this. And Amanda, don't come home until you do." He hung up. Her mother's call she didn't answer. Catherine Cole would cry, would say this wasn't who we are, would mean it without understanding that it was exactly who they were, who they'd always been, who they'd been designed to be. Lux Media fired her via email while she was still in the bathroom. "Your actions are incompatible with our values and have created an untenable situation for our clients and employees. Your termination is effective immediately. Your personal items will be shipped to your address on file." The same company that had approved her all-white Cartier campaign, the same executives who'd laughed at her economy class jokes in meetings, they were distancing themselves, pretending she was an aberration rather than their product. She was the symptom, but they were pretending she was the disease. Her friends stopped responding to texts. Her social media filled with death threats, and worse. She was radioactive, contaminated, untouchable. The very systems that had protected her now expelled her like a virus. She was experiencing, for the first time, what exclusion felt like. It was terrifying. It was clarifying. It was exactly what she'd made others feel her entire life. The Aviation Excellence Summit was happening at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. Elijah was giving the keynote. Equity at 30,000 feet. Reimagining aviation for everyone. Amanda had no right to be there. Her name was mud in the industry, but she went anyway, bought a last-minute ticket for $2,000 under a fake name, wore sunglasses and a baseball cap like a celebrity in disgrace. She sat in the back row, invisible for the first time in her life. When Elijah took the stage, the room transformed. He commanded attention without demanding it, spoke with authority earned through experience rather than inherited through privilege. He talked about his mother, working 3 jobs, watching planes fly overhead, about loading baggage with frozen fingers, dreaming of something more, about being told people like him didn't belong in boardrooms, then building his own boardroom, about creating Aerolux not despite being black, but because of it. "Exclusion is the best teacher of inclusion," he said, his voice filling the ballroom. "When you've been locked out, You understand doors differently than those who've always had keys. When you've been told you don't belong, you understand belonging as sacred, not assumed. When you've been denied dignity, you understand it as a right, not a privilege. He showed slides of Aerolux employees. Former homeless veterans, now flying commercial jets. Single mothers who'd gone from cleaning planes to managing airports. Kids from his old neighborhood who'd become aerospace engineers. Each story a refutation of everything Amanda had been taught about who deserved success, who had potential, who could fly. Some say I'm successful despite being black, Elijah continued. I say I'm successful because I'm black. Because I understand what it means to be unseen. I can see others. Because I've been told no, I understand the power of yes. Because I've been treated as less than, I understand that everyone deserves more. The audience erupted in applause. Amanda clapped too, tears streaming down her face behind her sunglasses. When the speech ended, she waited in the corridor, knowing she had no right to approach, but unable to leave. She had to face him. Had to face what she'd done. Had to face who she was. When Elijah finally emerged, heading for a side exit, she stepped forward. Mr. Brooks. He stopped, turned. She saw recognition flash across his face. Not surprise. Something else. Like he'd been expecting this. Miss Cole. She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the polished woman from the plane. I need to apologize, she started, voice shaking. Not for the cameras. Not for my reputation. But because what I did was wrong. Fundamentally, systematically wrong. Systematically, he repeated. Interesting word choice. It's accurate. I wasn't just one person being cruel. I was a system being revealed. A whole way of thinking, of seeing, of not seeing. He studied her for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part was? She waited. It wasn't the assumption that I was poor. It wasn't the disgust in your voice. It wasn't even the security comment. It was how natural it was for you. Like breathing. Like you'd done it 1,000 times before. I have, Amanda admitted. Not that explicitly, but yes. My whole life. Every day. In ways I'm only now beginning to understand. And now I'm disgusted with myself. Now I see what I've been. Now I understand that my entire worldview was built on lies I was comfortable believing because they benefited me. Understanding and changing are different things. I know. That's why I'm here. Not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But to ask, how do I change? Really change, not just perform change for the cameras? Elijah was quiet for so long Amanda thought he wouldn't answer. Then, change starts with discomfort. With sitting in spaces where you're the minority. With listening more than speaking. With using your privilege to open doors instead of closing them. With understanding that your comfort has always come at the cost of someone else's dignity. He pulled out a business card. Wrote something on the back. Aerolux is launching an initiative. Aviation education for underserved communities. We need someone to run outreach, to convince people who look like you, that people who look like me deserve investment. It would mean starting over. Entry level. Reporting to people you would have dismissed. Working with people who have every reason to distrust you. It would be the hardest thing you've ever done. Amanda's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? After everything, I'm offering you a chance to transform privilege into purpose. But understand, this isn't charity for your reputation. You'd have to earn every ounce of respect. Face every doubt. Prove every day that you're more than your worst moment. Why would you do that? Because my mother believed anyone could change if they wanted it enough. Because hatred is too heavy to carry on a long flight, and life is a long flight. Because sometimes the people who've walked the wrong path make the best guides for others to find the right one. She took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If you do this, you'll be starting at the bottom. $28,000 a year. No expense account. No executive privileges. You'll be reporting to Marcus Thompson. He started as a baggage handler, worked his way up, has an MBA from Howard, and has every reason to hate you. You'll be facing skepticism every day, and you'll have to prove, constantly, that you're more than what that video showed. I understand. Do you? Because understanding in theory and living it are different things. This isn't a redemption arc for your Instagram. This is real work, with real people whose lives have been shaped by the attitudes you displayed. I'm willing to try. Try isn't enough. You have to do. Send me a proposal. Show me you understand what we're building. Show me you understand why it matters. And Miss Cole, this would require actual change, not performed change. Can you tell the difference? I'm learning to. Then maybe there's hope. But hope isn't enough either. Hope without action is just another form of privilege. Amanda spent 2 weeks on the proposal, but not in the way she would have before. The old Amanda would have created something glossy, surface level, designed to impress. The new Amanda, if there was a new Amanda, did something different. She took the subway to the Bronx, talked to teachers in public schools about their students' career awareness. She discovered that kids who lived under flight paths, who heard planes every day, who had family working at airports, had never considered they could fly those planes, design those engines, run those operations. The dreams had been edited out before they could form, by systems that told them aviation was for other people. She visited Newark Airport, talked to immigrants working ground services. Many had been engineers, pilots, air traffic controllers in their home countries. Here, they pushed wheelchairs and cleaned bathrooms. Not because they lacked skill, but because their credentials weren't recognized. Their accents were too thick. Their networks were non-existent. She met Kwame, who designed aviation systems in Ghana. In America, he'd been a janitor for 15 years. I could improve half the processes here, he said. But without American credentials, I'm invisible. She spent time in Queens, in Elijah's old neighborhood, talking to young people about their perceptions of aviation. They saw planes as things that flew over them, not for them. They saw airports as places where their parents worked service jobs, not where they could have careers. They saw the sky as someone else's territory. Every conversation was a mirror, showing Amanda how her worldview had been shaped by exclusion disguised as excellence. Her proposal wasn't just marketing. It was a complete reimagining of how aviation recruited and developed talent. Partner with community colleges for certification programs that provided direct pathways to careers. Create apprenticeships that paid living wages while training, recognizing that unpaid internships were a luxury only the already privileged could afford. Develop mentorship programs pairing industry leaders with overlooked talent. Use media not just to advertise but to educate, to show possibilities, to break stereotypes that had been centuries in the making. She included a personal statement. I've spent my career selling exclusivity to people who looked like me, telling them they deserved more because others deserved less. Let me spend the rest of it selling possibility to everyone, showing that excellence exists everywhere when opportunity does too. 3 days after sending it, she received a response. Monday, 9 a.m. Aerolux headquarters. Don't be late. E.B. Marcus Thompson was everything Amanda had been taught not to respect. Community college graduate. Howard MBA. Instead of Ivy League. Started as a baggage handler. Spoke with a South Side Chicago accent he'd never tried to lose. Wore suits from Men's Warehouse instead of Armani. And he was her boss. Her 25-year-old, black, from the bottom-up boss. The universe, Amanda thought, had a sense of humor. Or justice. Maybe they were the same thing. Let me be clear, Marcus said on her first day, not bothering with pleasantries. I don't like you. I don't like what you represent. I don't like that Elijah hired you. But he sees something I don't, and I trust him more than I distrust you. So here's how this works. You do exactly what I say when I say it. You listen more than you talk. You learn more than you teach. And if you ever make anyone here feel the way you made Elijah feel on that plane, you're gone. Clear? Clear, Amanda said. Good. Your desk is over there. That's right, a cubicle. Your computer is from 2018. Your phone doesn't have long distance. Your first assignment, is to create flyers for a career fair at a high school in the Bronx. Budget is $200, due by 5 p.m. Questions. Amanda had 1,000 questions. How had she gone from $5,000 expense account lunches to $200 budgets? How had she gone from corner offices to cubicles? How had she gone from being someone to being no one? But she asked only one. What's the school's demographic? Marcus looked at her sharply. Why does that matter? Because I need to understand who I'm talking to. Not to exclude, but to include effectively. He studied her for a moment. 90% Latino and Black. 70% free lunch. 30% English as second language. Average family income, $30,000. Less than 2% go to four-year colleges. And how many consider aviation careers? According to last year's survey? 0. Then that's what we change. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Get to work, Cole. The first months were brutal. Amanda went from managing million-dollar campaigns to designing flyers on outdated software. From flying first class to riding the subway at rush hour. From expense account dinners to bringing lunch in Tupperware. From being the boss to being the lowest person on the organizational chart. She made mistakes constantly, called a community college surprisingly good, and got lectured about implicit bias, suggested they help communities rather than partner with them, and learned about savior complexes. Used language that revealed how much programming she still had to overcome, but she listened to the corrections. Adjusted, tried again, failed again, failed better. She learned that Marcus had been passed over for promotions at 3 airlines before Elijah hired him, despite having better qualifications than the white men promoted above him. That Keisha, the young woman who'd called her out on her first day, had a brother who'd scored perfect on pilot exams but couldn't afford the 1,000 flight hours required for commercial licensing. That Solomon, the janitor cleaning their offices, had been an aerospace engineer in Ethiopia, but his credentials weren't recognized in America. And at 50, he'd given up on his dreams. Each story rewrote her understanding of merit, of deserving, of the American dream she'd thought was equally accessible. She began to see that talent was universal, but opportunity wasn't, and that brilliance existed everywhere but was only recognized in certain zip codes. That the system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed to benefit people like her old self. 6 months in, she was presenting to potential corporate sponsors. Companies that could fund scholarships for the Aviation Academy. The room was full of people like her old self. White, wealthy, well-meaning but blind. Halfway through her presentation, a CEO interrupted. This all sounds very noble, but wouldn't it be more efficient to focus on candidates who are already prepared? Who come from backgrounds that understand excellence? The old Amanda would have agreed, would have found a diplomatic way to validate his point while gently redirecting. The new Amanda, and she was beginning to believe there might be a new Amanda, stood straighter. With respect, Mr. Davidson, that thinking is exactly what's kept this industry stagnant. Elijah Brooks came from nothing and built a $3 billion airline. How many more Elijah Brooks have we missed because they didn't come from the right background? Excellence isn't inherited, it's cultivated, and we've been looking for it in all the wrong places. Your company, she looked directly at him, has had the same leadership demographic for 40 years. All white, all male, all from the same 5 universities. Our program has produced more diverse talent in 2 years than you have in 4 decades. So who's really being inefficient? The room erupted. Some were offended. Others intrigued. By the end, 3 companies had committed major funding. Marcus approached her afterward. For the first time, he was smiling. Okay, Cole, maybe you actually get it. I'm starting to, Amanda replied. Finally starting to. That evening, Elijah called her into his office. You handled Davidson well. He reminded me of my father, of who I used to be. Used to be? I'm trying to become someone else. Someone better. Good. But remember, becoming better isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. Some days you'll fail. What matters is that you keep choosing. She started to leave, then turned back. Can I ask you something? Do you forgive me? For the plane? Elijah looked out at the Manhattan skyline, considering. Forgiveness isn't mine to give or withhold. You did that to yourself, not just to me. The question is, are you becoming someone who wouldn't do it again? I am. I mean, I'm trying to be. Then that's enough. For now, as she left, he called after her. There's a conference next month in Chicago. Aviation Diversity Initiative. I want you to present our program. With Marcus, with me. Amanda's heart skipped. Together? In public? After everything? Together. Unless you're not ready for that level of scrutiny. I'm ready. She wasn't ready. Chicago was where everything changed, though not in the way either of them expected. The presentation went well enough. Amanda had learned to speak about inclusion without centering herself, to advocate for others without saviorism, to use her privilege as a tool rather than a weapon. But the media noticed them together. Unlikely partnership. Racist incident leads to redemption story. The question mark was doing a lot of work in that headline. After the presentation, walking through O'Hare, Elijah showed her where he'd worked. I pushed wheelchairs right here, he said, pointing to gate K19. Loaded bags down there at gate L10. Spent my breaks at that window, watching planes, dreaming of being inside them, not as a passenger, as someone who belonged. Did you imagine this? Amanda asked. Building an empire? Changing an industry? No, he said simply. I just imagined being treated like I mattered, like I was visible, like I was human. They had dinner at a soul food restaurant on the South Side, Elijah's old neighborhood. He knew the owner, had gone to school with her son. The food was nothing like the Michelin-starred restaurants Amanda used to frequent, but she'd never tasted anything better. Real food for real people. No pretense, no performance, just nourishment. As they ate, Elijah talked about his mother, about growing up under flight paths, about the determination it took to transform dreams into reality when the world insisted you were dreaming too big. Your mother would have hated me, Amanda said. No, Elijah replied, surprising her. My mother would have loved who you're becoming. She believed in second chances, third chances, as many chances as it took. She used to say, the people who've walked in darkness appreciate light the most. You've been walking in darkness, Amanda, your own kind of darkness, the darkness of not seeing. Now you're starting to see. Sometimes I wish I could go back to not seeing. It was easier. Easier for you. Harder for everyone else. I know. That's why I can't go back. Something shifted that night. Professional distance became personal connection. They began working late together, not just on campaigns but on vision. Amanda saw Elijah's loneliness, the isolation of being the only one, the weight of representing more than himself, the exhaustion of always having to be exceptional just to be seen as equal. Elijah saw Amanda's transformation, not performed but genuine, painful, ongoing. The daily choice to be better than she'd been taught to be. 3 months later, a video went viral of a young black child being removed from first class on a competitor airline. The flight attendant insisting he couldn't belong there despite his valid ticket. The parallels to Amanda's behavior were obvious, painful, undeniable. The internet was quick to make connections. This is what that Aerolux woman did. Nothing ever changes. They only care when they get caught. Instead of hiding, Amanda acted. Within 24 hours, she'd helped launch You Belong in the Sky. Aerolux offering free first-class upgrades to young people flying to college interviews, job interviews, family emergencies. She worked 18-hour days, coordinating media, ensuring stories were told with dignity, making sure no child would ever feel like they didn't belong at 30,000 feet. During one particularly long night, both exhausted from fighting for press coverage, their hands touched, reaching for the same coffee cup. The contact was electric. They both pulled back, then looked at each other. Really looked. For the first time since that plane, they saw each other not as symbols, racist white woman, victimized black man, but as people. Complicated, flawed, trying people. This is complicated, Amanda said. Everything worth doing is complicated, Elijah replied. People will say I'm using you to rehabilitate my image. People will say, I'm betraying my community by letting you. Are you? I don't know. All I know is that somewhere between hating what you did and watching who you've become, I started seeing you. Really seeing you. Not the woman from the plane, but the woman fighting every day to not be her anymore. I see you too, Amanda said. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the symbol. Just you. Elijah. The boy who watched planes. The man who still flies coach to remember. The person who gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Maybe you did deserve it. Maybe we all deserve chances to become better than our worst moments. They kissed then, in his glass office where anyone could have seen, but the building was empty except for security. It was tentative at first. Aware of all the history between them, all the weight their union would carry, all the people it would anger, then deeper, hungrier, like they were trying to bridge not just their own gap but centuries of division in that single moment. When they pulled apart, Amanda was crying. This is going to be impossible. We specialize in impossible, Elijah said. That's literally our business model. They tried to keep it private, but privacy in the digital age was a luxury even billionaires couldn't afford. 3 months later, a photo surfaced. Them at a jazz club in Harlem. His arm around her. Both laughing at something the pianist had said. The internet exploded. CEO, Stockholm Syndrome, racist woman, seduces black billionaire for clout. The ultimate white privilege power move. Modern day get out. She colonized him. He sold out. This is why we can't have nice things. Amanda's DMs filled with death threats from all sides. White supremacists calling her a race traitor. Black activists calling her a manipulator. Feminists calling her a gold digger. Everyone had an opinion about a relationship they knew nothing about. Elijah faced his own backlash. Accusations of betraying his people. Of validating white tears. Of being the worst kind of sellout. The kind that forgot where he came from. The board of Aerolux called emergency meetings. Partners threatened to pull funding. Stock prices dipped. Everything they'd built seemed ready to crumble. I should leave, Amanda said, pacing his apartment. It was the first time she'd been there, and she was struck by how normal it was. No penthouse, no luxury, just a brownstone in Brooklyn. Comfortable but not ostentatious. Books everywhere, photos of his mother, models of planes. I should disappear. Make this easier for you. Your legacy matters more than whatever this is. Elijah caught her hands, stilled her. Do you remember what I said about my mother? About weight? That hatred is too heavy to carry. Love is heavy too. But it's a weight worth bearing. We don't owe anyone our story. We don't owe them explanations or apologies for finding something real in an unreal situation. But your reputation, my reputation will survive. Will yours? I don't have a reputation left to lose. Then you're free. We both are. They decided to face it publicly. At the next conference, they appeared together. The room was tense, electric with judgment and curiosity. Elijah addressed it directly. Many of you have opinions about my personal life. You're entitled to them. But I'm not entitled to demand perfection while denying growth. I'm not entitled to preach forgiveness while practicing revenge. And I'm not entitled to build walls personally while tearing them down professionally. Amanda Cole has worked harder to confront her biases than most people ever will. She's faced her worst self and chosen to become better. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. Amanda spoke next, unscripted. I fell in love with a man who showed me that strength isn't about putting others down but lifting them up. Who taught me that privilege without purpose is poison. Who gave me the chance to earn forgiveness through action, not words. I know what I did. I know who I was. I'm not asking you to forget that. I'm asking you to see who I'm becoming. And if you can't, I understand. I couldn't see for 28 years. The applause started slowly, from young people in the back, spreading forward. Not everyone clapped. Some walked out, but more stayed than left. A year later, Elijah proposed at Gate 23. JFK. Early morning before crowds arrived. The same gate where she'd discovered who he was. The same gate where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. "Amanda Cole," he said. "On one knee, you've taught me that people can change, that love can grow in the most unlikely soil, that the worst beginnings can lead to the best endings. You've shown me that forgiveness isn't weakness but strength. Will you marry me?" She said yes through tears. The ring was simple, recycled gold, ethically sourced stone, designed by a jeweler from his old neighborhood. It was perfect in its imperfection, like them. They married 6 months later at the Chicago airport, where Elijah had first worked. The hangar was converted into a reception space, decorated with models of planes and photos of Elijah's journey from baggage handler to billionaire, Amanda's journey from privilege to purpose. Her father didn't come, couldn't accept his daughter's choice, but her mother did, sitting in the front row, crying. "I'm proud of who you've become," Catherine Cole whispered. "It took courage to leave who you were. It took Elijah to show me who I could be." "No," her mother said. "He showed you the door. You walked through it." Marcus was best man. "I hated Amanda when she arrived," he said in his speech. "Hated what she represented, what she'd done. But she did something I didn't think possible. She actually changed. Not performed change for the cameras, but real change. Daily, difficult, uncomfortable change. And watching her change changed me. Made me realize that holding on to hate was keeping me grounded when I needed to fly." Keisha was maid of honor. "Miss Amanda showed me that where you start doesn't determine where you end. That mistakes don't have to be forever. That people can grow. She's not perfect. Neither is Mr. B. But maybe that's the point. Maybe perfect people can't teach us anything about becoming better." Their first dance was to Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come." As they swayed, Elijah whispered, "No regrets?" "Just one," Amanda replied. "That it took me so long to see you, but you see me now, and you see me. The real me. Not the performance, not the persona, not the privilege. Just me. I love the real you. The one who does the work. The one who chooses to be better every day." That night, an Aerolux plane flew over, pulling a banner. "We all fly the same sky." 5 years passed. The Aviation Academy graduated thousands. Aerolux became the most diverse airline in America, not through quotas but through genuine opportunity. Amanda and Elijah faced constant criticism, but also constant success. Their programs changed lives. Their example changed minds. Their love changed them both. When Amanda got pregnant, they had hard conversations about raising mixed-race children in a divided world. "They'll face things I faced," Elijah said. Comments. Stares. Questions about what they are, instead of who they are. "They'll face things I never faced," Amanda added. Not belonging fully anywhere. Being bridges between worlds that don't want to meet. Bridges get walked on, Elijah warned. But bridges also connect. Amanda countered. And connection is what the world needs. The twins came early, Dolores after Elijah's mother, and Marcus after Marcus Aurelius. As Amanda held them, tiny and perfect and brown, Elijah whispered, "They're perfect. They're going to have challenges. All children do. But these two? They're born from love that crossed oceans of history. They're born from change. They're born from hope. They're born from work," Amanda corrected. "The work of becoming better." 10 years after that first flight, they sat in the same seats, Flight 723, filled with Aviation Academy graduates. The plane was full of young people who'd been told they didn't belong in the sky, now heading to careers that would put them there. Elijah addressed them. "Every one of you was told you didn't belong here, but here you are, proving that the sky belongs to everyone brave enough to claim it. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let anyone make you invisible. Don't let anyone make you believe you're not enough." Amanda felt the twins, now 5, kick her seat from behind. They were discussing whether planes or rockets were cooler, a debate that had been going on for months. She thought about the woman she'd been, so certain of her place, so wrong about everyone else's. The journey from that moment to this hadn't been straight. It had been turbulent, difficult, sometimes seeming impossible. But it had been worth it. "Mama," Dolores said, "why did you and Daddy meet on an airplane?" "Because," Amanda said, "sometimes you have to go up high to see things clearly. But Daddy said you were mean to him." I was very mean. I didn't see him for who he was." "Why not?" "Because I'd been taught to look at the wrong things." "What things?" "The outside things instead of the inside things." "That's silly," Marcus Jr. said. "The inside things are the most important." "You're right," Amanda said. It was very silly. But sometimes, adults need children to remind them of simple truths. 20 years after that first flight, at the twins' high school graduation, both headed to MIT like their father, the principal told their story. Children of an unlikely love, proof that change is possible, that America's promise can be more than words. But Dolores, the valedictorian, corrected him gently. "We're not proof of anything, except that our parents loved each other and us. We're not symbols. We're not statements. We're just people. And that's enough. That's everything." After the ceremony, the Brooks family stood together for a photo. 4 people, multiple shades. One love. Behind them, a plane traced a contrail across the sky, writing nothing and everything in its wake. Amanda thought about that first flight. When she tried to make Elijah small, tried to put him in a box, labeled less than. Now their love had made them both larger than they'd ever imagined possible. Their children would fly higher than either of them, unburdened by the prejudices that had once seemed like truth. "Ready to fly?" Elijah asked, because they were leaving for a family vacation. "Always," Amanda replied. "Always ready to fly." And she meant it. They walked toward their future together. The sky endless above them, their children, debating whether to study aerospace engineering or astrophysics. Their hands finding each other as naturally as breathing. Somewhere, on another plane, another conflict was probably playing out. Another assumption being made. Another prejudice being performed. But somewhere else, someone was choosing differently. Someone was seeing clearly. Someone was falling in love across impossible divisions. The sky, after all, was big enough for everyone. And love, real love, the kind that did the work, that chose to be better, that transformed privilege into purpose, that love could lift anything, even the weight of history, even the burden of hate, even 2 people who should never have met but did, at 30,000 feet, where the air was thin but the view was clear. Flight 723 still flies the route from Los Angeles to New York. Sometimes in business class, in seats 2A and 2B, 2 strangers sit side by side. What happens next is up to them. The sky doesn't care about the color of their skin or the size of their bank accounts. The sky only cares that they're brave enough to fly. And in the end, that's all that matters. The courage to fly, the courage to see, the courage to change, the courage to love, the courage to believe that we all fly the same sky.